Hi, I'm John Rentoul. After Rishi Sunak sacked Suella Braverman and hired David Cameron, The Independent asked you for your questions about Rishi Sunak's cabinet reshuffle. Let's see what you asked. Zend19, usual spelling, said, when Sunak used his prerogative to appoint Cameron to the Lords, did he intend to annoy Nadine Doris, or was that just a bonus? I suspect that's a rhetorical question. It was interesting that Rishi Sunak appointed David Cameron through the Lords. It's been done before. Peter Mandelson was brought into Gordon Brown's cabinet via the House of Lords. Nadine Doris obviously created quite a lot of damage by her sulk at not getting a peerage on Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. I think she was a bit hard done by because I don't think anybody actually explained until it was too late. She couldn't get a deferred peerage, that she had to resign as an MP if she wanted to go to the House of Lords, and I don't think that option was ever put to her. So yeah, she's entitled to be a bit annoyed. Swizzle asks, John, in your opinion, why did so many Conservative MPs step down from ministerial positions? That is a very interesting question. I thought one of the significant aspects of the reshuffle was that a large number of mid-ranking ministers, many of them really quite good in my opinion, stood down from office, thus weakening the government, I think. People like Jessie Norman in the Transport Department, Neil O'Brien, another very clever policy-driven minister in the Health Department, and Nick Gibb, who's one of the longest-serving schools ministers and very responsible for very important reforms, bringing in phonics in primary schools. Responsible for, I think, a huge leap in teaching young children. All those ministers stood down. I think that's because they sense the end is coming. The government's heading for defeat. They met in the corridor, sort of metaphorically speaking, other ministers coming in, such as David Cameron and Andrea Leadsom, who think that they might as well be ministers for a year, even if it's only going to be a year. But I think the net effect is to weaken the government. Alex Black asks, do you think David Cameron doing next to no politics for 7 years makes it harder to be Foreign Secretary than, say it was a newly elected government? I think that is an interesting question. Actually, whatever I think of David Cameron and my opinion of him has gone down over the years. One thing you could say about him was that he's very, very quick. He absorbs a brief very quickly. He worked incredibly hard as Prime Minister. A lot of people didn't give him credit for that because he had this reputation for being the chillax Prime Minister, which I thought was unfair. He used to get up very early, work through his red boxes. The contrast with Boris Johnson was very striking. So no, I think David Cameron will pick up very quickly as Foreign Secretary and will work hard at making all the international connections, renewing all the international connections he made as Prime Minister. Paul Gillian asks, given what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine and an election in at most a year's time, are there any wider implications to David Cameron's appointment other than signalling? It sounds like the Foreign Office to-do list is already written. I think that's underestimating the possibility that unexpected things will happen over the next year. I mean, the idea that David Cameron's just going to sort of sit there and do what officials have already prepared for him, I think is a little unlikely. And the one thing you can say about David Cameron is that he does have a lot of political experience, and I think Rishi Sunak can trust him to just get on with the business of being Foreign Secretary and dealing with international crises, freeing him, Rishi Sunak, for the domestic agenda in an election year. Councillor Ross Armour asks, forget David Cameron, what does it say about the rest of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that not one of their MPs is deemed competent enough to be Foreign Secretary? I think that's a simplification. I think Rishi Sunak wanted to bring in a respected, reassuring figure. I mean, obviously, in the short term, he wanted to distract from the antics of Suella Braverman. Didn't want her departure to be the big story. But I think in the longer term, he wanted to strengthen the government with someone who had a lot of experience. I mean, one of the complaints that people have about this government is that the turnover of ministers has been so high. that very few of them have built up the experience and the competence necessary. So bringing back someone such as David Cameron, who has a lot of experience, a lot of contacts already, understands politics at quite a deep level, I think that there's a good argument for bringing him back. I mean, obviously you don't want to bring too many unelected lords into the cabinet, but one or two appointments I think is a sound idea. And our last question. Stephen asks, why did Suella Braverman stay in the government if she disagreed fundamentally with its policies? I'm afraid Braverman does not come out of this well. I think that's a very fair point. I mean, if you read Suella Braverman's letter, you think that her disagreements with Rishi Sunak were so fundamental that she must have realised before now that he wasn't doing what she expected him to do. She would say that, you know, she was giving him a chance to live up to the deal that they allegedly did when she became Home Secretary. But really, if she disagreed with him that deeply, she should have resigned on principle instead of waiting to be sacked. And I think her letter portrays her as weak and petulant, complaining about, you know, the mechanics of a deal, a sort of a backroom deal, instead of really standing up for her principles. And I sort of agree with that question. Thank you for watching You Ask the Questions. You can find more episodes on Independent TV.